Now then, welcome back. We're looking backwards on the Premier League weekend that was. We had Jose Mourinho and Spurs winning away to West Ham 3-2. We had Arsenal and Southampton drawing 2-2, a late equaliser for Arsenal. Leicester 2, Brighton 0, away from home as well. Liverpool did their thing again, 2-1, very late on, away to Crystal Palace. Everton 0, Norwich 2 has provoked much of the chatter today, largely around Marco Silva's future, or lack of future, it would seem, at Everton. Man City beat Chelsea 2-1, and then yesterday here and off the ball we brought you Sheffield United 3, Manchester United 3. Gary Breen is with us. Gary, Liverpool 37 points, Leicester 29, Man City 28. I'm still in my head subconsciously at all times saying Liverpool have a 9-point lead in the league, not 8 points. When do I have to start genuinely stop looking past Leicester and overlooking Leicester and the form they're in?
Oh, listen, we've had a lesson in terms of overlooking them before, and I think this team is capable of dominating games in a way that team didn't, but it'd be foolhardy to rule them out as such. But the big difference is that Liverpool and Man City are such top teams that it'll be very unlikely for them to overtake them. But nevertheless, Brendan Rodgers has done an amazing job at Leicester. Yeah,
that is the thing, because when Leicester did win, there weren't enough teams in top form and in a good place.
Exactly. I think that was the season Chelsea finished 10th. You know, and Arsenal, I remember Arsenal and Welbeck getting that late winner at the Emirates and Arsenal celebrating. Remember that in the change room there were selfies of them beating Leicester 2-1. They brought the title race back to 2 points. Invariably, in the end, Leicester won it by 10, so it just sums Arsenal up more than anyone. But incredible achievement then, but I think it's unlikely for them to do it again.
The tone of your voice there when you said the word selfies would suggest you're not a fan of that.
No, not particularly. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a time and a place for them, certainly in and around silverware. I wouldn't be convinced to be taking selfies, celebrating a home win when invariably you're in a title race where a lot of your main competitors are not there, and Leicester then end up beating you by 10 points. I don't think that's the time for it.
Much of the talk today centres around Marco Silvas. They lost 2-0 to Norwich. That's 2 wins and 9 for Everton. £200 million sterling to spend over the last year or so. They are 15th in the table, 4 points above relegation zone. It seems Bill Kenwright, who's the chairman, Marcel Brands, who's the director of football, and then Farhad Moshiri, the majority shareholder, got together for a meeting on Saturday. All the speculation today is that this thing is done and dusted. And then there's talk of David Moyes coming in, interestingly enough as well. What's gone so badly wrong here for Silva? Because it did seem when he first came on the scene that he looked like a really promising manager.
Well, that probably covers all his time in the Premier League, because initially he comes into Hull and I thought he was impressive in terms of how they were playing. Gave Harry Maguire games that no one else was given at the time, looked impressive, but fundamentally failed in the end, didn't keep him up. Goes to Watford again, starts well, but the kind of wheels fall off again. And this is something, this is a problem, even to get that Everton job now. It wasn't a big surprise, bearing in mind he would have been deemed that he failed at 2 previous Premier League clubs because of the fact that they went so big for him. They wanted him, didn't get him initially, then they went back and got him. And that's why you felt that it had to work. And if it doesn't, it'd be unlikely, I think, that we'll see him in the Premier League again if he loses his job at Everton. I think that's very much likely now at this stage, because he had an impressive CV, there's no doubt, in terms of work he done in Portugal, obviously in Greece as well. But I just feel, and I say this about players as well, just feel the Premier League asks questions that the mainland Europe leagues don't, and it's a tough league, it really is. And I think a lot of people have found him out in terms of how he's playing. And if you're at a club like Everton, bearing in mind that they found financial muscle so difficult to come by, now suddenly they've got it, just don't seem to buy well. And it's starting to look a little bit now how it was at QPR when they had that newfound wealth under Fernandes as the chairman, and they just seem to be wasting millions and millions of pounds and just don't seem to be getting it right at all.
Yeah, I think, Gary, the fact that Everton play Leicester at the weekend sort of it drums home what they could be to a degree. You know, that like with a sort of a lesser spend. I know Leicester have spent money too, but in a shorter space of time, what Rodgers even has done there, it's probably a nightmare fixture for Silva, really, if he even gets that far. That you have on the opposite side someone who shows what can be done, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always felt that Everton were always judging themselves in terms of what Tottenham were doing and the brilliant job that Pochettino had done over the 5 years, and the very fact that they built their stadium as well. We keep hearing about this new stadium at Everton, the fact that these guys were coming in, and everything seems to be set in terms of they have that financial backing. And you talked about Marcel Brands. He's done a brilliant job at PSV in terms of overhauling Ajax, who was so dominant in the area Eredivisie. And him and Koku got it right recruitment, everything right to win 3 titles in 4 seasons. So they do look like they have the people in the right places, but they're not getting it right where it matters, and that's on the pitch.
Well, under Moshiri now, this will be Roberto Martinez, Ronald Koeman and Sam Allardyce. And I suppose Marco Silva sacked since he started really investing in 2016. So he's getting through his fair share of managers. On the face of it, they all look like reasonable appointments or a certain logic, whilst appreciating that Martinez is very different to Sam Allardyce. And by the way, Everton's next few fixtures...
I was just going to say, have you seen the fixture list?
So, you know, Gary, do you want the job? And then you say, well, I'm interested. And then you see that it's Leicester, then Liverpool, then Chelsea, then Manchester United. You may be saying, well, let's just let this play out for a couple of weeks.
No, listen, I think anyone who's offered the job will take it straight away. I think they'll think that there's an opportunity there, you know, with money to spend as such. I don't buy into the fact that Pochettino will get it. I don't see that at all. I think Pochettino now will go to one of the elite level clubs in Europe. He has to go to a club now that wins trophies, because that's something a stick used to beat him with all the time. So I don't think they're going to pull him. But you're kind of looking at other managers and thinking, OK, do you go back to Moyes in terms of how successful he was? It was in a different time. He'd done a great job there, but there were some seasons where they had their lowest points tally in the Premier League. I know they had their highest one with him as well. But everyone seems to be reluctant to go back. A lot of talk about Eddie Howe. He's not in a particularly good run himself, but obviously a talented manager in his own right. And, these clubs need to be looking at people like Chris Wilder and seeing what he's doing, what he's achieving with little or no money, and the fact that we're always, and I'm delighted in terms of how cosmopolitan the Premier League is, and I want to see the best of the best, be it managers, whatever. But I do think at times we do overlook the managers who are doing great jobs. And Chris Wilder's not an overnight success. This guy's been producing incredible returns over the last 5 years, to be honest. So I'm delighted to see him doing so well, but it's unlikely that they'll go for someone like him. It will be an established name again, I believe.
Well, it seems like it's going to be Moyes as caretaker till the end of the season. Where are you and Moyes now? Is the jury somewhat out on him at the moment? It kind of has to be.
Well, listen, I thought he'd done a good job at West Ham, and I've been in his company a couple of times over the last few months, and I think he felt that he would get that West Ham job. But again, you know what it's like. Everyone doesn't want that pragmatic manager. They want to try and be a bit more, kind of someone with a bit more of a Hollywood star. Well, I know like Pellegrini doesn't look that type, but he's a serial winner as such. So they pushed the boat out to get him West Ham. But he needed that. There's no doubt he needed to do a good job at West Ham after the horror show at Sunderland, because his CV, his kind of reputation took an awful battering up there. And then obviously in Spain didn't particularly work out, although he'll argue he's a better manager for the experience going over to Sociedad. So listen, it does look a good fit. I think ultimately you want to get a manager who the fans want. That's the big difference, because if you're up against and they're not believing in you, it's a very hard job. Look at what's happening now at Arsenal, even with Emery, in terms of the fans. I think at this stage are doing something that we normally see in Spain, that they're waving in white handkerchiefs.
Well, that was what I wanted to go to next. You obviously watched the club very closely. A 2-2 draw late on against Southampton. So they've drawn three and lost 2 of their last 5. Their last win was that 1-0 win over Bournemouth in October. First time since '98 they've had a run like that. And Southampton are winless in 8 games. You know, that's the context here. A 1-0 win against Sheffield United back in September was their last win. And it does seem this was the first time that the crowd in the stadium made their feelings known on Emery. Now, it's really tough road back from that. What's going on? Like, when you look at the performances over the last couple of weeks, what are we seeing here?
We're seeing a team and a club ultimately that just lacks leadership. It really does, from top to bottom. You're looking at, the fans are probably being vocal now. And anyone who doesn't have any affiliation to Arsenal or have friends who watch it are probably saying, it's Arsenal fans moaning again. They wanted Wenger out. Now they want Emery out. But you just have to look at what they're having to see. Initially, when Emery came in, I thought it was a good appointment. I thought it was a good appointment for Arsenal, and I felt it was a good appointment for Emery in terms of where he was at after PSG. And initially, I thought, this is good. It's everything you want. He was making that team accountable for its performances, in that star players who would never get dropped under Wenger were. They looked more tactically astute or more aware of what you had to do in terms of coping with the opposition, as opposed to just saying, we play our way and we're not going to take any notice of the opposition, and fitness-wise. So all that good work, certainly in that first 6 months, bode well. It really did. But that 22-game unbeaten run, which looked great at the time between September and December, wasn't without its fault, in that the opposition used to open up Arsenal so easily. They genuinely could. I was at games quite often at that time where West Ham, Everton should have won, should have been 2 or 3-0 up at half-time, weren't. And then Arsenal showed their quality in the second half, won the games. But now you've got a real problem, Joe, in terms of, if you watch Arsenal now, no matter who they play, we're talking about Southampton, had 21 attempts on goal. the week before, or a couple of weeks before, Wolves had 25 attempts on goal. Listen, you just can't compete in the Premier League when you're affording the opposition that many chances. And there was a real opportunity on 2 or 3 occasions for Southampton to get that killer third goal. They didn't pay the price, but I'm looking at them now, and no leadership in the boardroom, no leadership ultimately with a manager, because he's letting the players choose who the captain is. And in terms of on the pitch, there's no leadership whatsoever.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the boardroom, because one of the long-standing members there, Amy Lawrence, had a piece, and he was on the brink of resignation because he feels the board has been completely sidelined by the new architecture of the club. You know, you've got the head of football, you've got Edu, who's sporting director, and they think they may want to keep Emery for a while longer. The board are unconvinced, but people on the board are saying, well, we're effectively redundant here. So even behind the scenes, there's a general malaise after setting in. One thing I wanted to ask you about, the 7 formation and 50 lineup changes that Emery has made in 7 games was a big talking point today in a couple of the papers. So 7 formation and 50 lineup changes. That sounds like it's just gone beyond the point of a manager who can, you know, in a very astute way, pick and chop and change his side to suit the opposition. That sounds like a frantic search for something.
Yeah, it's literally gone from one extreme to the other, in that Wenger would rarely change it. Wouldn't do it. Maybe he did with that back 5 towards the end of his reign to try and get a bit of solidity back there. But he plays a back 5 for the first time of the season against Leicester, and they just got absolutely ripped to pieces. To the extent where you have Lacazette and Aubameyang, 2 really good centre forwards. Of course, they're at this level. They had to track Leicester's overlapping fullbacks. They were more like left backs and right backs themselves, and this is the frustration. And ultimately, what this does is it just gives those players, those weak players, a crutch to say, listen, this manager, we don't know what he's doing. And you'll hear those soundbites coming out of that dressing room now. And that's the frustration, because I think he's a very hard-working manager. I think he's a good manager. But ultimately, the reason why he's failing is that he did not rid that team of that Wenger cotton wool culture, where they're just so weak mentally. They're gifted, technically gifted players. Yes, they are. Of course they are. But they're woefully below the standard associated with Arsenal.
That actually has started, Gary, because I think there was a piece in the Telegraph today, and it was carried in the Independent, where there was source quotes from the dressing room along those lines, the tactics, and like when that starts, Gary, you just sense that the game over is coming anyway, doesn't it? Like once that starts to come out there.
Of course, Dan, and also you want to kind of back the manager, but there's been a lack of consistency from him in that he discarded his Ozil for 6 consecutive squads where he don't even make the squad. Now suddenly he brings him back for that League Cup game against Liverpool at Anfield. I mean, 5-5. I mean, you can't catch your breath on that. And now suddenly he's the main man again. Now listen, I've said to you guys before, I think Ozil should be in the team. I think too many of those players use his indifferent form as an excuse. I think he can elevate any team, but you've got to build a team around him. And this is the frustration, is ultimately you've got Chambers in a back 5. This is a guy who's playing centre midfield for Fulham last season. You know, Arsenal didn't want him there, and he goes to centre midfielder at Fulham, get relegated, which can happen. But you're just looking around the team, and I don't know, there's a making of a talented squad there, but Emery ultimately will pay the ultimate price, and because he's not getting a tune out of him.
Yeah, because I am curious, because I don't watch enough of Arsenal to know, but I mean, sometimes when you go into a chaos like that, you think a manager comes in and there's a quick fix, but I'm sort of wondering, with the personnel that's there, is there that quick fix option that someone can come in and, like, you know, solidify that team if, as you mentioned, maybe those characters aren't there? Like, what is the easy solution to their problems?
Well, ultimately, and this is, when you think about Arsenal supporters at this stage, there's a generation now who grew up with Wenger and that iconic Henry, Vieira, those type of teams, expansive football, Fabregas, brilliant, unbelievable. But there's a generation before who worked and watched George Graham's, you know, the 1-0 to the Arsenal, how defensively strong they were, and obviously he developed that iconic back 4, back 5. But these are both generations now. If a manager came in and straight away said, right, our priority is, let's just get two proper centre halves who can defend, I think the whole ground would love it. Not in a way, you know, like some managers turn up, they're pragmatic, and you think, oh, this is going to be boring. These Arsenal fans are desperate for it. They know that their team can score goals, but they're just so porous. And another thing, Emery, he's got a really talented, young, gifted holding midfielder in Torreira. And he really hit the ground running last year. Looked so impressive. And yet this season, Emery's trying to play him in an advanced midfield role in a 10. With his back to play. I mean, if you look at his stats, I think he's got something like 3 or 4 goals for club and country in the last 100 games. So there's no doubt that he's not that type of player. And that's where the confusion now, where the supporters are now looking at Emery and thinking, you just don't know how to fix this problem.
Man City and Liverpool continued their pattern. I did want to ask you about the other North London club. So they went to West Ham and they won 3-2, and Mourinho was obviously in his element for various reasons.
Yeah.
One thing which jumped out at me was he definitely seems to have targeted Dele Alli as a man he needs to get back in form, and there were pictures from the ground of him talking to Ali and arm around Ali, and made a big thing about how well he played at the weekend. So he said the thing he told Dele Alli to do was just run in behind Harry Kane again. Like, let's get back to that. Make runs in behind Harry Kane. And it was just funny because when I think of United the week Mourinho left and then Solskjaer came in, this is the exact thing Solskjaer said that players had to start doing. The likes of Lingard and those players had to make runs ahead of the ball and start running in behind the ball, and the Mourinho shackles had to be taken off. And now Jose's rocked up and told Dele Alli to start running in behind Harry Kane. How long will this keep up?
Oh, listen, I back Mourinho to be far more successful than Solskjaer in terms of going forward. I think this won't be the new manager bounce that we saw under Solskjaer. I think Mourinho will have a huge impact on Tottenham. And I think what's been so impressive, probably in terms of what's happening in North London, was how decisive Daniel Levy was to recognise that Jose Mourinho was available, that Arsenal had some murmurings about him, and ultimately discarding a manager who the next morning would be courted by all of Europe's elite clubs in terms of they would want Pochettino. That puts that decision under intense scrutiny, but he was decisive. He made a decision. And this is the problem that Arsenal fans are having with the hierarchy at Arsenal, is that they're just letting things drift in the way that they did under Wenger. But in terms of Mourinho, and in terms of any manager, Joe, to be perfectly honest, they'll always come on and put an arm around any manager when they first turn up. And it's all that stuff. But ultimately, what I would say that he said to Dele Alli, just lose yourself in hard work. Just run around. Because I think at times he kind of tried to be a bit more of a player rather than just using his energy that we first saw when he came into the Premier League. Now, listen, there needs to be a little bit of context in that Dele Alli's had 3 hamstring injuries, and that does stop you running in behind. And now suddenly he's fit again. We heard in terms of reading the papers today how disappointed he was in terms of his role with Pochettino getting the sack. He felt guilty. So we've now got a Dele Alli now who to really prove a point about his manager, will probably want to go on and prove he is a top player, because Pochettino found him at MK Dons when at the time up the road Aston Villa were buying all these players from France. They had him right under their noses. They didn't do the deal. Got him for £5 million and turned him into a top-class international player. So it's up to him now to get back to that, and I think he'll probably do that as a fitting tribute to the manager who found him.
I would say the general consensus over the past week here on the show with different people giving their tuppence worth and just generally has been that Mourinho and Daniel Levy's just a marriage made in hell. This just can't work, for just obvious reasons. Yeah. That must have struck you when you heard the news. It
did, but I was under no illusions that they would have sat down and Daniel Levy would have told Mourinho what the remit is. And Mourinho would have said, well, listen, if I can't do it the way I want to do it, then, so they've come to an agreement. And Mourinho's looked at that squad and thought, this is a talented squad. Never won a trophy. And it's incredible how much the Tottenham fans are mourning a manager who in 5 years never won them a title. And I remember a quote from, and I'm a massive fan of Mourinho, of Pochettino, I told you that, ever since his Southampton days. But he said a quote last year when people said about, you have not won any silverware, and he said, trophies only build egos. Yeah, exactly. You need to have an ego to have that sense of entitlement. And I think Jose Mourinho's got that. And these Tottenham players now know that they've got a manager who expects to win trophies. Not potentially we can do, expects to. And even his statement, Joe, he said, we can't win the league this year, but we can win it next year. I mean, no wonder these players are going to buy into it. Listen, it's a horrible feeling when a manager who you have so much belief in and who's been brilliant in your career leaves a club. It's such a hollow, guilt-ridden feeling. It really is. But these players have an opportunity now to win silverware, because if it continued and Harry Kane would start looking elsewhere and thinking, I'm getting to 27 years of age here, I'm one of the best centre-forwards in the world, and I haven't even got near a trophy.
Yeah, well, maybe the decision to get Pochettino, we can kind of see the logic. I'm holding my breath on Jose as we run out of time.
Oh, I knew you would, yeah. You're a Solskjaer man anyway.
I'm definitely not a Solskjaer man.
He is. He was anyway. You abandoned them now.
Listen, I would say one thing, Pochettino, what a manager, but people talking about him going to Arsenal, that is not going to happen.
No.
This is a terrible thing to say. He's too good for Arsenal. Yeah. He can't go into another club and have to rebuild. He needs to go into a team now, be it a United, a Real Madrid, something like that, Juventus, Bayern Munich, where you're winning trophies. He's that good.
And what about Solskjaer and the spirit he's imbued this Manchester United team? No, I'm not even going. We're kind of out of time anyway.
Pull the plaster, Joe. Pull the plaster.
Yeah, okay. Listen, good man. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys. Good luck.
See you. Gary Breen there. Our football coverage with thanks to Paddy Power. For information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. We're back in a second or two with a few of your texts.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
Down to business.
As the year winds down, we're revving up for our last Your Town, Your Main Street of 2019 as we roll into the Kingdom. We'll be broadcasting from the Plaza Hotel in Killarney on Saturday, November 30th as our panel